Miracle Maker is an animated film released in the year 2000 and was a British and Russian co-production directed by Derek W. Hayes and Stanislav Sokolov. It tells the life story of Jesus, starting from the beginning of his ministry and ending with his death and resurrection. This was truly an amazing movie. Going into it, I wasn't sure whether it would be more so aimed at a younger audience, but it's really not. It can be viewed by all ages, but obviously there are intensely dramatic and some violent events during the life of Jesus, and this film doesn't shy away from those at all. It's just under 90 minutes in length, so it is a somewhat condensed version of the story, and some events are depicted happening quite close together for the sake of keeping it at a shorter runtime. But otherwise, I think it's a fairly accurate retelling. Something I thought was so interesting was showing certain people as popping up throughout the ministry of Jesus. For myself, when I'm reading the Bible, when a person is mentioned or is a central focus of one story or one particular event, I don't think of them possibly being present during other things that happened. For example, Jairus, whose daughter Jesus raised back to life, he and his family are shown dealing with his daughter's illness right from the beginning of the film, and his wrestling with whether or not he wants to ask for Jesus' help as she's getting more and more sick. There are a couple of things like that where just because a person is present for one miracle in Scripture and is only talked about then, why wouldn't they have continued to follow Jesus and might have been there to witness future miracles, or were on the roadside as he rode into Jerusalem? It all makes the world of this movie feel real and lived in, something that is also greatly helped by the animation. And speaking of the animation, I just loved it. I've always been a fan of stop-motion animated films, and the animators of this movie were simply brilliant. Apparently that is where the Russian portion of this production came in, with an animation company from Moscow being responsible for all the puppetry and stop-motion work here, and it looks beautiful. The costumes for all the characters have so much texture and detail, it looks really realistic. The robes and headgear from ancient times like this would have been quite the undertaking to build all from scratch, but they hit it out of the park. Same thing with the characters' faces and hair. It's not going for exact human realism or human likenesses, but still, they're all so subtly stylized. The sets as well are filled with so much detail. Everything from the city walls of Jerusalem to the small shabby houses that the poor people live in, to the huge rooms where we're introduced to Pontius Pilate. All of it is so well designed and decorated, you honestly forget that you're watching miniatures sometimes with the grand scope of certain shots. A very interesting choice was to have only the events happening in the present time being animated in stop motion, but everything else, such as the parables that Jesus tells, and flashbacks, and even some more dramatic miracles or spiritual events, all of those are done in hand-drawn animation. The transitions from stop motion to hand-drawn were so well done and smooth. Also, not every hand-drawn scene looks the same, probably owing to different animators working on different scenes. So something like Jesus being tempted in the wilderness has one style, and then something like a flashback to Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead has a slightly different look. And one scene where Jesus cast the demons out of Mary Magdalene was frightening and intense and so well presented to give those feelings and demonstrate how Jesus could fight back evil like that. The water effects were also very beautiful, and that's important, with a couple of key moments happening in water, such as Jesus' baptism and when he prompts Peter and his brother to cast their fishing nets into the water. Obviously they didn't do the water effects in stop motion, but adding it in afterwards and having those effects interacting with the figurines and their props all looked really great. The vocal performances are really excellent across the board, starting with Ralph Fiennes as Jesus. He brings a soft-spoken style at times, and then can go to a much more powerful place during something like Jesus throwing the moneylenders out of the temple. Richard E. Grant had an interesting voice for John the Baptist, but it worked well after I adjusted to it. Similarly, Ken Stott played Peter, and I've never pictured Peter with a Scottish accent, but I quite enjoyed it. He also brought a good sense of humor to a couple of scenes, and fit that role of Peter doing and saying things before he thinks. And he was able to embody that very nicely. Miranda Richardson played Mary Magdalene, and she had maybe one of the more difficult roles from a voice perspective, especially during that scene I mentioned where the demons are controlling her and Jesus frees her from them. And her voice had so much emotion and depth to it. The score was composed by Anne Dudley, and I thought it too was just perfect. That full orchestral sound gave me the feeling of an old-fashioned biblical epic and elevated this movie so much in certain scenes. Some movies are already good on their own, but when you pair them with the right sound and full-bodied musical accompaniment, it just takes the whole feeling and atmosphere of the movie to another level, and I think she achieved that here. The Miracle Maker is unlike any other animated movie I've seen. The Gospel is the most important and amazing story ever, and I think this film retells it in a way that is filled with emotion and reverence. As I said, the writer and makers of this movie portrayed the story in a very accurate way, and it was so well animated. It's surprising actually how invested a person can get in a movie that's featuring all rubbery puppets, but that's the effect this story has. I would assume that not all of the people involved in the making of this film are Christians, but they give it their all, from the actors to the crew to the animators, and just proves how God is able to use all kinds of people to spread His word. The Miracle Maker is very powerful, and I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching my review. If you enjoyed it, please check out my channel, Hildebrand Productions. Thanks again, and adios for now.